Now, yesterday, the EU withdrawal bill, which would convert all current EU law into UK law after Brexit, was introduced for its second reading in the House of Commons. We'll show you a bit of that debate later, but although the attention this week has been focused on life after we leave the EU, the battle to define how Brexit actually happens goes on inside the government and opposition. So where exactly are the fault lines? Tories concerned about the consequences of withdrawal from the single market and customs union, that's people like Nicky Morgan and Anna Soubry, have criticised the withdrawal bill for giving ministers too much power over how to incorporate EU law. But Theresa May's facing pressure from another side too, the much larger Eurosceptic group of Conservative MPs. Yesterday, a letter emerged in which dozens urged the Prime Minister not to stay in the EU by stealth. The letter was circulated among a social media group containing two junior members of the government, Brexit Minister Steve Baker and Treasury aide Suella Fernandez. Labour has agreed a three-line whip on its MPs to oppose the EU withdrawal bill as it stands. The party's Brexit spokesman Keir Starmer says Labour wants to stay in the single market and customs union during a transition. But it's divided on the nature of the final deal with the EU. One group of Labour MPs, including former shadow ministers Heidi Alexander and Alison McGovern, is campaigning for permanent membership of the single market. But Labour's 2017 manifesto said freedom of movement will end after Brexit, something John McDonnell has said is absolutely clear. There's expected to be lots of pressure at the party's conference from the Labour campaign for free movement, backed by people like Clive Lewis for a rethink. Backing that campaign is the former union leader, Billy Hayes. He is here with me now in the studio, and also joining us is the businessman and founder of Labour Leave, John Mills. Thank you both for being here. Billy, what exactly do you want to do at conference? Will you be setting a motion down on this issue?
Well, that's still being debated as to what's going to be discussed, but very much we want to be in favour of the continuation of free movement of Labour. The decision of Keir Starmer on the front bench is a good move in the right direction. So the third part of that has got to be a continuation of free movement.
But only till the end of a transitional deal.
Well, let's just deal with where we are at the moment. We've yet to see the whole of Brexit, the disaster that's Brexit played out yet. So it's, at this stage, we're campaigning there needs to be the continuation of the free movement of Labour.
And just to be clear, you've signed up to a campaign with a commitment defending and extending the free movement of people in the context of the debate around Brexit. So do you ultimately want to make it easier for people to come here?
Well, I think the big thing is that immigration and the free movement has been a good thing for this country and is a good thing. The world's most successful economy is built on, like the USA. It has been built on immigration, and immigration has been good for this country. And that's what the Labour campaign for free movement is about, is the continuation of free movement, which has been good for the UK and is good for our economy.
And just to be clear, in 2016, people voted for Brexit. Do you not accept that limiting free movement was part of that vote?
Well, the polls, that's obviously was a part, the whole question of immigration. But there's a recent YouGov poll that said that people would accept free movement of Labour if there was a deal on the single market. That was a YouGov poll. So yes, obviously immigration was a factor, but you know, the fact of the matter is free movement of Labour in this country has been a good thing.
And John, you know, they're basically saying that it's the best way to protect and advance the interests of all workers. What do you say to that?
Well, I'm not at all sure that's right. I think what's happened in this country is that we've had a large amount of immigration from people from Eastern Europe with low income expectations who have come in and competed quite strongly at the lower end of the labour market. And the Bank of England produced a report showing that, in fact, this was depressing wages. And I think
depressing wages very slightly, and it was only one report that is obviously quoted quite heavily. And the Bank of England have actually made that smaller since then.
Well, I think that there is controversy and doubt about exactly the extent to which this has happened. But it's very hard to believe that having large numbers of people coming in who are quite prepared to work for low wages and people who have got lots of aspirations and prepared to work hard doesn't have some effect on the labour market. And I think also because we've had such a big influx of people who are prepared to work for low wages, this has discouraged investment in the UK. Productivity has been stuck in this country for nearly 10 years now. So I think there are downsides to having complete free movement of labour. I think that what the Labour Party really needs to do and the country needs to do is to put some constraints on labour there, but have as free a movement as we possibly can of people who are on high incomes and who have the skills that the economy really needs.
And Billy, how do you respond to that, the idea that there has been an impact on lower paid workers?
Well, you yourself have just said that, you know, that's debatable about what it's done to wages in this country. But you know what's interesting is the reaction to the Tory proposals. A friend of mine was trying to get through to the office of the CBI yesterday, and the switchboard was jammed with businesses saying that recent Tory proposals are.
So you're talking about the leaked proposals that suggest a pretty big crackdown.
Yeah, and in the CBI, the switchboard was jammed yesterday with people trying to get through to say, what is this nonsense they're talking about in terms of restriction of low skill, this leak you talk about. So I think...
Well, you say that businesses were talking about that. We didn't hear very much from the Labour front bench. Even Diane Abbott, the Shadow Home Secretary, who we know is somebody who has talked about the virtues of free movement, hardly had anything to say about that leaked document.
Well, I can't speak for the Labour front bench. What I can say is that Labour Campaign for Free Movement is about supporting those people in the party and wider society who think immigration has been good for this country and is helped with in lots of areas. There was a woman on the other day on the TV talking about the impact on care homes if these restrictions go in, as I say, and the CBI is, as we all know, is against the government proposals.
I know you can't speak for the Labour front bench, but presumably you know quite a lot of the figures who are on the front bench. Do you know if any of them are supporting your position?
Well, we've got some MP support, and I couldn't tell you the whole list, but former front bench member Clive Lewis is one of the supporters of the Labour campaign.
But without naming them, are there people in the front bench?
Well, I'm not going to say if I know people on the front bench who are supporting the Labour campaign for free movement of Labour. But, you know, I think this campaign is going to take off because people see if we're going to be in a single market, if we're going to be in a customs union, then the logic of that, there needs to be free movement of Labour as well.
But Labour went into the election saying free movement will end. John McDonnell has said it, Keir Starmer has said it, Jeremy Corbyn has said it.
Yeah, I'm not speaking for the Labour front benches. I'm speaking for those people in the party who think...
But you think that Labour should go against its manifesto?
Well, it wouldn't be the first time any party's gone against what it said in its manifesto. But the point being is that we need to stiffen the sinews of those in the party who believe that the free movement of Labour in this country, in Europe, has been a good thing for Britain. And
John, this is really challenging for Labour because there are voters on both sides of this divide and they're very passionate.
I think they are, but I think there's a large majority in the country who are in favour of a reasonable amount of immigration but aren't in favour of completely unrestricted immigration. And, you know, if Billy's campaign is going to allow everybody in from the EU, why don't we let everybody in from all over the world? I mean, there seems to be some illogicality about all this.
And what did you think of the leaked proposals from the government about a post-Brexit system?
I thought they were far too restrictive and draconian.
So what sort of system would you like to see?
Well, I think we need some constraints on free movement of labour from Eastern Europe, but as free a system as we can possibly devise for people who the economy needs for all sorts of purposes, and some of them are highly skilled and some of them are other people like picking fruit.
OK. And Jack, where's all this going to go at Labour conference?
It's going to be a bun fight. I mean, you've seen there, you know, this debate is happening right the way through the Labour Party at the moment. And Keir Starmer, the Shadow Brexit Secretary, has manoeuvred the party quite cleverly into a position without too much of trouble. But if you speak quietly, and I'm sure you've done it yourself, to certain Labour MPs, particularly ones from northern constituencies where a lot of people voted Brexit, they're very nervous about Labour's current position on this. They're very worried that their voters are going to turn around and say, hang on, you're trying to stop Brexit happening altogether. And
that said, you know, Isabel, in the election, Jeremy Corbyn did say he'd end free movement, but when asked if the numbers would come down, he said, maybe, which suggests that they did pretty well in the election without going too hard on immigration.
Well, I mean, I found Billy's interview there quite extraordinary, really. I mean, you blithely talk about it being possible to renege on your manifesto. The recent history of parties that just blithely ignore their manifesto commitments isn't exactly a pretty one. Look what happened to the Liberal Democrats. The Tories have learnt a few things to their cost as well. And I found it extraordinary that you weren't challenged on the claim that Brexit is a disaster. Where is your evidence for that? We haven't got Brexit yet. And furthermore, you know, you repeatedly claim that people want free movement of people. Well, the result of the Brexit referendum was clearly indicating that people do want an end of free movement of people. And I find it very strange that you continue to press for this, and I think your campaign is going nowhere.
Billy?
Well, it wouldn't be the first time a journalist has told me the campaign I was involved in is going nowhere. But what is definite is...
But it is a good point, isn't it? You know, you make promises in an election and you can't just break them. And then also, how do you know that Brexit's going to be a disaster?
Well, I think if you talk to the business community about the impact of the talks, we haven't even left the EU yet, and the impact of the talks. If you talk to people in business and the CBI, they can see what's looming large in terms of, you know, if we're going to be in the single market, just on what's currently being mentioned, and the customs union, as it seems to be moving towards.
Well, where do you get that from? That's not the case. We're not going to remain in the single market and the customs union.
Right,
that's not the government position.
That's the Labour position only during transition.
Yeah, that's the Labour position, but the fact of the matter is, what's looking like that's what's going to happen. And if you're in the single market, if you're in the single market, you must support the free movement of labour. That's, you know, and I don't. But
are you saying that Labour should keep that as a permanent position then?
I don't speak for the Labour Party. I'm speaking for this campaign. And at the moment, we're campaigning to make sure.
But you are running to be representative of the Conference Arrangements Committee, which is a very influential committee in what's discussed at conference.
Yeah.
In fact, the ballot has just closed.
That's right.
A few minutes ago.
Yeah.
So you do speak for the Labour Party to some extent.
I haven't been elected yet. I don't know whether I'm going to be elected. So I can't take responsibility for a Conference Arrangements Committee I haven't been elected to. Look, all the people who were for Brexit, you know, the Mail and all the various journals and all the rest of it, the fact of the matter is that free movement of labour in this country, in the European Union, has been a good thing for this.
I think that's a controversial claim. I don't think you can justify that.
How damaging, John, could this be for the Labour Party, these differences?
Well, I don't think it helps getting the Labour Party elected for the next general election to have all these differences. I think it would be much better if the Labour Party could coalesce around a policy and support the government and unite the country as much as possible on these negotiations. I mean, it is difficult, but I think that's what Labour ought to be doing, rather than further and further dividing the country by some of the sorts of proposals we've heard.
OK, we'll be keeping an eye on all of it. Now,